Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. Good to have you watching on FanDuel TV or listening on Spotify. Week 15. Can't believe I'm saying that. Week 15 is in the books. Only 3 more weeks left. We had a possible Super Bowl preview. We had a battle in Pennsylvania. We had a weird Sunday night game and everything in between. We're going to hit on all of them. You know how we get started here with our lessons from the week. Steven Ruiz, start us off. What do you got?
All right, this might be an overreaction, but I don't care. It's an overreaction Sunday when we have all these great games. Yeah. If I'm making my pick of the offensive coordinator candidates for a head coaching job, give me Joe Brady over Ben Johnson after what I saw on Sunday and after what I've seen all season long. I mean, Joe Brady, when you compare the offensive numbers, like the EPA, they're right there. The points scored, they're right there with Detroit. But Joe Brady is working around an offensive line. It's not a bad offensive line by any means, but it's not the elite offensive line and the skeleton key to do whatever you want that Ben Johnson enjoys in Detroit. And we haven't really seen Ben Johnson outside of that environment yet. We've only seen him for a couple of years as a Detroit's offensive coordinator. But no, this game I thought was about Josh Allen being a star and then Joe Brady putting these players in positions. We talked about this on the Friday show, but putting these players, these playmakers in position to dominate their matchups. And we talked about the man coverage plan that they were going to have because you have to have a man coverage plan whenever you go up against Detroit. And I don't know if I've seen a better game plan all season long than the one I saw out of Brady. Like the use of Ty Johnson as that mismatch nightmare against that banged up linebacker core that Detroit has right now. And Detroit, my God, all of these injuries, it has to stop at some point. They lose Aleem McNeil, the defensive tackle. They lose Carlton Davis. Dan Campbell said after the game that he thinks both are season-ending injuries. So those are 2 huge blows to them, to add to obviously like Aiden Hutchinson's out. But I thought that Joe Brady really preyed on that and really exploited that talent deficiency they had, because Detroit does like to match up. If you match up with guys and you're shorthanded, it's going to be easy to pick apart. But I thought Joe Brady did a very good job of finding those matchups and setting them up, like the 4th and 2 to Ty Johnson, the little pick route where he motions him out to the slot to give Josh Allen the man zone tell, and then he sets up the pick play perfectly, so it's 1 yard within the line of scrimmage, so it is legal to free up Johnson. And then the play out of the backfield where he runs like a little wheel route out of the backfield against Quan Alexander, just 2 masterful plays. The run game, which was built around Josh Allen. We talked about the under center run game in the preview show, and they barely even use it. They used Josh Allen as a option quarterback today, and it really worked. And then like the red zone creativity, the little shovel pass to Khalil Shakir to kind of put the game away. Just a masterclass performance by him, and like checked every box you want to see out of an offensive coordinator and a head coaching candidate.
You know, Sheil, I think you said this on the preview show that Josh Allen is like elevated himself to the level of like you touched the hem of his quarterback cloth, and now you get to be a head coach. And I think that we kind of mix up how much of this is Josh Allen versus the structure of the offense. Sure. I think that my takeaway from this game was a little bit more about Josh Allen than it was about Joe Brady. And to me, so much of this I think just centers around the fact that when Josh Allen doesn't want to be sacked, he can't be sacked. If he doesn't want to be pressured, he can't be pressured. This was the most dropbacks that ended up outside the pocket. Some of that's bootlegs, but a lot of that is Josh Allen being able to break, contain on free rushers, on unblocked pressure, in muddy pockets, and be able to extend. Obviously, you get that frozen rope to Keon Coleman, I think it was, up the right sideline, where he just points to the guy, hey, go upfield another 15 yards. I'm going to pin this to your chest. I mean, the ball is in the air for like 2.5 seconds, going like 60 yards downfield. So to me, I think this was more just about an absolute masterclass from Josh Allen in how to deal with tight pressure from a defense, how to deal with breaking down pockets, being able to create outside of structure, and then knowing when to just take what's in the structure of the offense, knowing when to just pepper them with checkdowns, knowing how to get the ball out into the flat, knowing how to throw with accuracy outside the numbers and in the middle of the field. He did everything, right? If there's an MVP case game for him, it's not the one in the snow against the 49ers. It's this game because of what he can do against a defense that is throwing as much as it can at him. And obviously the injuries were a piece of why Buffalo is so effective. But Josh Allen basically rendered any answers that Aaron Glenn could have had moot pretty early in this game.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree that Joe Brady did a nice job today. I don't go nearly as far as Ruiz did in saying he's shown me more than Ben Johnson has or anything like that. Like, I try to put another quarterback in this game, in this ecosystem. And I think there are quarterbacks who could have done some nice things. To your point, they had a great plan for man coverage, and there are other quarterbacks who could make some of those throws. But man, Josh Allen, this has become the year of Josh Allen. Like, the only question now is, does he get it done in the playoffs? Does he get to his first Super Bowl? But so far in this game, I'm with you, Diante, this had it all. Just the physical attributes and the physical toolkit of this guy that is on display week in and week out. I mean, he throws for 362 yards, 2 touchdowns. To your point, no sacks, no turnovers, runs for 68 yards. I mean, the Lions needed like 1 stop in the fourth quarter of this game. They got they got a couple field goals, but they couldn't get that. Their Bills had 559 yards in this game, 28 first downs. The last 2 weeks, even going back to that Rams game, these have been like 2 of the top 20 performances by any offense in a game this entire season. And so you're seeing this Bills offense right now, statistically, I didn't think this was possible, is better than any other Bills offense that Josh Allen has quarterbacked. So I guess that's a feather in the cap of your argument there, Ruiz, that this is the best version even with Josh Allen. But man, the guy, this just feels like it's happening for him right now. And it's narrative, it's stats, it's film, it's sitting on your couch on a Sunday. The guy looks like the best player in the NFL right now.
No, he's insane. And this was an insane performance, but they averaged 8.2 yards per play as a team. They had a 54% success rate on the ground. They averaged 0.27 EPA per run. That's not even counting the passing plays. Like, this was a total performance from them. Like, Josh Allen was out of his mind, but it wasn't like he was carrying the team on his back in this game. Like, everyone else did their part. The offensive line did their part. James Cook was amazing. That touchdown run he had was crazy, where they tried to tackle him by his locks. Khalil Shakir made plays. Obviously, Ty Johnson made plays. I just thought it was a fantastic performance all around. Like, Dalton Kincaid had a couple plays. Just 11 players on the same page, an offensive coordinator who's just humming, and then a quarterback who just can't be stopped right now. Like, these deep throws, we talked about it on Friday. These deep throws, they are like, it's like there's a magnet in the football. They're like sticking to the receiver's chest. They have no choice but to catch these passes, and they're tight.
It catches them. He's a bunch of those. Yes. It catches them balls.
It definitely does. And then you had the chest pass. The play didn't even count, but I don't care. That's one of the coolest plays ever. So, and I'm with, like, you remember when Patrick Mahomes, I think it was last year, when he was like, that ref just like robbed Kelsey of a Hall of Fame play. I was going to go, that's what I'm saying. I thought Mahomes was a dork for saying that last year, but I felt the same way after that play was called back.
Yeah, Bills have to be feeling great here. I mean, we'll see. You mentioned Mahomes. Mahomes has the ankle injury. Chiefs win. They're going to have a tough time catching the Chiefs in the regular season because, they're 2 games back here. So that's still unlikely, but they have the confidence where they can really go anywhere. It looks like this team can go anywhere in the AFC and win. And they're the favorites right now. If you look at FanDuel, I believe, to come out of the AFC is the Buffalo Bills. Diante, the other side of this, how do you view this game for the Detroit Lions? I just tweeted out that they had 28 plays of 10+ yards in this game. That's the tied for the most by any team in a game in the last 25 seasons. So, they were in this. It kind of lived up to the hype, high scoring. But as Ruiz mentioned, they have some injuries now too. How do you feel about this loss if you're a Lions fan?
I have 2 thoughts. One of the conversations that we had in the preview show was trying to suss out what Jared Goff would be like when he was far behind in the game script. And I actually thought that he handled himself pretty well. There were some misses in the second and third quarter that were very kind of reminiscent of old Goff, muddy pockets, taking some pressure on the interior, not able to drive the ball. And you kind of saw some issues in the passing game. But I thought on the whole, for chasing 2 scores for most of this game up until that kind of mad dash in the fourth quarter, I thought that he threw the ball really well. He continued to push it downfield. He wasn't dissuaded by the zone shells that Buffalo was throwing at him, which I thought was encouraging, right? That lets me know that this offense still has an ability to score when it's not dominating the game script in the way that it has over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And that part is nice. And I wanted to make sure I started with that take, because on the back end of it, and it sucks because this team has had such a good season, there comes a point in time where the injuries kind of start to become an eliminating factor for you, or something that you have to consider for why a team can't contend for a Super Bowl. And I'm just watching Detroit's front seven get caved in snap after snap after snap in the run game. I mean, Buffalo had its way getting explosives there. The times that they couldn't like manufacture unblocked pressure with a twist or a stun or trying to draw something up. I thought that there really wasn't much there in terms of pass rush, and that was before Lee McNeil got hurt. And then he's hurt, and you just start going through the list of guys that they're missing. And I know that Dan Campbell is optimistic that if they can just get to the playoffs, Anzalone might be back. Maybe you get Aiden Hutchinson back by the NFC Championship game if you make it that far. But you start talking about season-ending injuries for your second best corner, for your best interior pass rusher. You're already going to be missing linebackers. You might not get Aiden Hutchinson back, right? This is still a long shot that they're talking about for him to be able to play in the postseason. At a certain point, you just kind of have to face the fact that they just might not have the bodies that you need. And this has probably been the case for the last couple weeks. I just think that coming out of this game, and then you think about the fact that Green Bay moved the ball at will in spite of all the issues with game script that they were having in that Thursday night game. And you really have to start asking some questions about whether or not Aaron Glenn's going to have the horses he needs to be able to win NFC playoff games.
They're going to have to change the way they play. Like, they signed all these guys. They brought in Carlton Davis with the goal of playing more man coverage. Like, Carlton Davis said that. He's like, they brought me in to lock down, is the exact quote he used. And now that he's not there, like, I don't know how you can continue living in man coverage. I mean, Aaron Glenn tried against the Bills, and it just did not work at all. Josh Allen averaged over 11 yards per attempt against man. He had a 78% completion rate. And I know he was tearing up zone too, but he was better against man than he was against zone in this game. And I mean, I don't know. This isn't a championship level defense at the moment. It's not. It's totally due to rotten injury luck. But especially in conjunction with how Philly looked and how they looked against a defense that kind of tries to play in a similar way, especially on the coverage side of things. And now Detroit's not going to be able to really play that way. I feel like the matchup with Philadelphia has me more worried, or just as worried about their Super Bowl chances as the injuries at this point.
Yeah, they need to have like some individualized defensive game plans in the playoffs. But at some point, like, we can say that, but at some point, you know, these games come down to one-on-one matchups, and can you pressure the quarterback, and can you stop the run? And the injuries are just taking a toll on this Lions team. But I'm with you, Diante. Like, we kind of wanted to see this type of game script for the Lions, and they scored touchdowns on their final 4 possessions of the game. Like, they were, you know, that they showed up in the second half and gave themselves a chance, even though they couldn't get over the hump. All right, Ruiz, I got to circle back, because as we've been talking about this, I've been considering your first statement. So do you think Joe Brady could take this Lions offense and have it be as good? And do you think if Ben Johnson took over this Bills offense, it would be worse? Because I do not.
I don't think it would be as good, the Lions offense.
Okay.
But I don't think Ben Johnson would coordinate a better offense than what Joe Brady is coordinating now. But that's like also besides the point. I feel like a head coaching job, the play calling aspect of it is so overrated. We've seen many of these play calling geniuses on both sides of the ball finally get a head job, and that kind of gets in their way. And by all accounts, Ben Johnson is kind of a quiet guy, and some people don't really see him as like head coaching material. Like, he's not that rah guy, that Dan Campbell type. Whereas I think Joe Brady seems to get along with his players, and I've seen him, like, he obviously got fired in Carolina. I thought Matt Rule made him a scapegoat. Like, he was like, the guy wasn't running the ball enough, and
he 100% was a scapegoat.
But when you look at those game plans and what he did with those rosters, I thought he did a fantastic job of coordinating that offense and getting some good play out of Sam Darnold. Christian McCaffrey goes down and the offense kind of falls apart. But we've seen that happen in San Francisco with literally the best play caller of maybe all time in Kyle Shanahan. And then Joe Brady coordinated one of the best offense, or he didn't coordinate, but he was calling I think he was the pass game coordinator for one of the best offenses in the history of college football. Obviously, he was working with a lot of talent.
They had some talent. Yeah, I'm with you on the. Yeah, I'm with you on the play calling. I don't know enough about either guys, like just leadership skills or anything like that, to say whether they would be good or not. So we'll see, though. Like we said, listen, if you're a if you can get close to the great quarterbacks, you're gonna get those interviews at least, and then you just got to sell a few people in the room there.
I will say, doing it with Jared Goff is way more impressive than doing.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I was gonna ask you, because I mean, all your like the gap. You probably say bigger gap between Josh Allen and Jared Goff than probably anybody I know. So for him to be doing this for Ben Johnson to be doing this with Jared Goff, and for Joe Brady to be doing it with Josh Allen, that's why I can't understand why you're saying what you're saying.
But that offensive line turns Jared Goff into the type of player who can hang with Josh Allen.
Okay.
So I don't know.
It's a good take. Listen, it's week, what week is it? 15. We got to come up with something.
I was leading the show. I had to come out strong.
That's right. You got to come in hot. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about that Eagles team that Ruiz just mentioned. We're back on the Ringer NFL show. My lesson is that the Philadelphia Eagles had the best Sunday of any team in the NFL, and this goes to what Ruiz just mentioned. So first of all, they played the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tumultuous week. This thing could have gone in a bunch of different directions. If they come out, they're not completing passes, they're not getting A.J. Brown the football. I know what that stadium's like after a couple 3-and-outs in the first quarter. It could have got real interesting in Philly. It didn't. I thought Jalen Hurts played one of his best games of the season, and it really comes down to what we've talked about before. When the ball comes out in rhythm and you take the easy throws and you're not holding it and risking a sack and trying to scramble, then this offense can be efficient and explosive. I mean, A.J. Brown on a slant is like a 20-yard play every time. It's crazy. Every time he catches one of those, he takes off. And so that's what they did. They came out, they were throwing the football, taking those easy throws. Hurts goes 9 for 9 to start the game. And then they end the game, I don't know that I've ever seen this, with a 21-play, 88-yard drive that takes over 10 minutes off the clock.
That's some Service Academy.
That's good. I was like, 21 plays. Am I looking at the wrong column here? 21 plays to end the game. So anyway, they win the game. They beat the Steelers. Now they're 12-2, tied with the Lions. And really, this goes to what Ruiz was saying, is that they're relatively healthy right now, and the Lions are getting banged up on defense. And so you now have an opportunity to potentially catch the Lions for that 1 seed, depending on what happens in the final 3 games of the season. And I really do think it matters in a big way whether that Eagles-Lions potential game is in Philly or if it's in Detroit here. Obviously, the Vikings are still in the mix here too at 11-2. But in terms of outcomes for the Eagles, Diante, going into this weekend, there were some that could have been like, oh no, this isn't good. It's happening again. What happened last year? And for it to happen this way, I think they had the best Sunday of any NFL team.
For sure. And I mean, the issue to me had less to do with what they were going to see on the back end versus just you've got to deal with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. And I thought, based on the way that Jalen Hurts had been playing in the pocket over the last 2 to 3 weeks, seeing a pass rush unit like Pittsburgh was about as bad as it could get from a matchup perspective, because you have guys that can win one-on-ones, that can make pockets uncomfortable. You have one of the best finishers that I've maybe ever seen in TJ Watt. So I thought that today was going to be awful from that perspective. And there were definitely some ups and downs still. But to me, the biggest thing that Jalen Hurts had to prove, quote unquote, was not to be Tua or be Jared Goff and be some some whiz of throwing the ball within 2.5 seconds. It was just not turning down the throws that we know make this offense. That's all it took. And I thought that today, and you saw it early, there was clearly a concerted effort that, hey, if we give A.J. Brown that slant, that 5-yard in route, and he's got the guy on his back, there's nothing else to think about. Throw the football. Give him a shot. If you've got him one-on-one with Joey Porter out on the boundary, put the ball up. Even if it's an incompletion, just take the chance. And I thought that them doing that early was exactly what this offense needed, because it forced Pittsburgh to have to make some difficult choices between when they wanted to play man and zone. And I thought that once they were able to loosen up the defense, you instantly saw the value of Devontae Smith in this offense. Now he gets to work in the intermediate areas. He gets to work underneath. And I thought that really more so than the throws to A.J. Brown, those were the throws that mattered most to me. Was that every time Devontae Smith presented himself in the middle of the field, whether it was an over route, sitting right over the ball as a check down, running drags or shallow crossers, whatever the case may be, him working over the middle of the field and Jalen finding him, being very intentional about getting him the ball in space and allowing him to create, that's the kind of balance they can strike in the passing game, that does make this offense impossible to deal with because they were able to move the ball while Saquon Barkley was clearly disengaged for a lot of the game. And I didn't look to see exactly what it is that he's dealing with. It looked like he took a helmet to the thigh. I don't know if that's a bone bruise. I don't know if it's a contusion, whatever the case may be, but he was clearly uncomfortable after taking that hit from Minkah Fitzpatrick. So with him not being in the backfield and not being the best version of himself once he came back into the game, this offense looked great in the drop back game. And that's exactly what Philadelphia needed to show. And now I feel like I'm back on the boat in terms of thinking of them as the best team in the NFC, at least right now.
Ruiz, where are you with that conversation?
I'm still on Green Bay. I mean,
okay.
Did you see Green Bay tonight? I
yeah.
Feel like, but I've said for the last couple of weeks, I think Green Bay beats Philadelphia, but I think Philadelphia beats Detroit, and I think Detroit beats the Packers. Now, I may have to reassess that after the injuries that Detroit have suffered. And like, obviously that was a close game before Detroit just lost their last two guys, Davis and McNeil. So I'm still sticking with the Packers, but no, this was a very convincing performance against a defense that's like the ultimate litmus test for championship contending offenses. Like they held the Ravens, who, for my money, when they're rolling like they were today with Lamar Jackson throwing 5 touchdowns, the best offense and the hardest offense to defend in the NFL because of that quarterback. But the Steelers held them to their worst performance of the season. And then for the Eagles to be able to not only like win the game like they won it, but to dominate it in the fashion that they did in the second half, only 2 possessions for the Steelers in the second half. Yeah. And that last 10-minute drive, how mad do you think Mike Tomlin was watching that on the sideline? How jealous do you think he was?
Yeah,
he's like, that is my bit. You stole my bit. It's like the Soldier Boy meme where he's like, word for word, bar
he
for
stole
bar.
my whole flow.
Yeah, he stole his whole flow. But to be able to do that to this team, to the bully team, is insane. I've never seen the Steelers get bullied like that over a 30-minute half, and that's what this was. And then Jalen Hurts, obviously, I mean, just throw the ball to A.J. Brown. We've been saying it all year. Just throw the ball to A.J. Brown and good things happen. And I agree with Deontay's point. I thought the more encouraging throws were the throws to Devontae Smith. He found him in rhythm. He found him out of structure. Devontae Smith, I think, is one of the more underrated receivers in the league. And it was kind of underrated that he was also complaining about the passing offense last week in the post-game locker room. I know A.J. Brown stole all the headlines because of the Brandon Graham soundbite, and obviously A.J. Brown was the one that got recorded saying the offense, but apparently Devontae Smith wasn't happy either. So to see those two guys kind of, have good games again, to know that this drop back passing game is still capable of doing this against the right matchup. And this was a good matchup. If they didn't do it against this defense that loves to play cover one man and leave those wide receivers on an island outside, then I would have been concerned. But this was like the complete opposite of that. This was the most encouraging performance I've seen out of this team all year long. It was the first time we've seen them get a top 10 defense by DVOA, as you pointed out on Friday.
Yeah. Only team, only defense, only top 10 defense they'll face the entire season. They have had by far the easiest schedule of opposing defenses all year. And then on the other side of the ball, you mentioned it, the Steelers had 2 possessions. The Steelers ran 11 offensive plays in the second half, tied for the fewest of any team in the last 10 seasons. They had a Najee Harris fumble, and then Mike Tomlin punts on like 4th and 7 near midfield when they're down 2 touchdowns. He's thinking, we'll get the ball back. Never got the ball back. 11 offensive plays the entire second half. They had 163 yards of offense. The 10 lowest yardage totals in the NFL this season, 3 have come against Vic Fangio's defense for the Eagles. So a good Sunday for the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll hit on the Pittsburgh Steelers side of it in a little bit here. Let's take one more break, and we're going to talk about the team Ruiz likes to come out of the NFC and the team they faced, the Seattle Seahawks. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Diante, what do you got? What lesson did you learn?
I think that Green Bay really just stamped itself as a team that you have to consider to make the Super Bowl with how they played. And I think that this was the exact kind of game they needed to have coming off of the loss to Detroit last Thursday. And we talked about it in the preview show, right? This was going to be a variance game for both teams. We know that Geno Smith usually operates really well against the blitz, and Green Bay likes to get very creative up front on that end. And then on the opposite side, you know that Jordan Love wants to hunt for explosive plays, and Mike McDonald's entire defensive system is predicated on not allowing quarterbacks to get to that. And I just thought that Green Bay dominated both facets of that. from start to finish. And I think that if you're a Seahawks fan, there's a lot of apologia you can get to, right? You get the Geno Smith injury in the third quarter that effectively ended the game from there because you knew Sam Howell wasn't going to give them a whole lot. But I just thought that Green Bay getting out to that fast start, being able to move the ball on the ground just enough to force Seattle to have to honor it. And then you got to see Jordan Love do what he does best, aggressively seeking out throws outside the numbers, taking those deep shots down the field when they're available. To me, this is the exact kind of football game that Green Bay wants to play. And I think that Steven said it best. If they saw Philadelphia again, I think they can beat Philly. I just think that maybe Detroit has their number a little bit on the other side of the ball because of what Ben Johnson can design in the running game and the play action game. But as long as Jordan Love can get the football, you should feel pretty good as a Packers fan that he can get you to the end zone.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think for a while now in the NFC, I've been looking at these three teams, Lions, Packers, and Eagles. It's going to be one of those teams getting to the Super Bowl. Vikings fans, I understand you're playing well. You're 11-2. I don't quite put you in the same class, but I might look stupid about that down the road. But yeah, this Packers offense comes out against the Seahawks defense that had been on fire the last month, and 5 of the first 6 possessions, 2 touchdowns, 3 field goals there. And then their pass rush gets going as well. Ruiz, did they show you anything else tonight or just kind of an affirmation of what we've been seeing for most of the season?
I think it's mostly just an affirmation just because, Sam Howell comes into this game and like his numbers, I think that was.
You know what I was thinking when Sam Howell came in? I'm like, Ruiz is the happiest man in the world to see Sam Howell play like this.
Now, obviously didn't want to see Geno Smith go down with the injury, but I do think it was a good illustration of how flawed this offense is. Sam Howell's numbers, he averaged 0.26 yards per dropback. Yeah. What is I think that's less than a foot per dropback. I think it's like about 9 inches per dropback. Minus 0.79 EPA per dropback with a 10% success rate on the evening. Like 10%, the offense couldn't move the ball at all without Geno Smith back there. And this has looked like a borderline top 10 offense all season long when he's back there, at least top 10 passing game. And it was maybe one of the worst performances we've seen from a quarterback, at least for a half, from Sam Howell in this one. But no, I think this performance is about Jordan Love and like just the heater he's been on. I think I called it like a month ago. That was one of my good calls of the season. I think on the midweek show, Sheil, I said, I just think Jordan Love's about to explode. Since week 11, he's 3rd in EPA per dropback. Only Josh Allen and Jared Goff are ahead of him.
Wow.
He's averaging 9.3 yards per dropback over that span. That's the highest in the NFL. And if you look at his overall numbers on the season, he's now reached his EPA average from last season, 0.12. That's what he averaged last year. He's averaging it this year, but his yards per dropback has increased by over a yard. His success rate has increased by 3 percentage points. He is big game hunting, but he's been more solid down to down than I think we've given him credit for, especially over the last month. And the only quarterbacks playing better than him right now, I think, are Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. That's the list. Maybe in Joe Burrow. I would put Joe Burrow in there, but that's the list. And Jordan Love isn't really turning the ball over as much as he was. And Joe Burrow even had 3 turnovers today. So maybe I would put Love ahead of him. But when you have a quarterback playing like this and you have a defense that's playing solid, I don't know how good they're going to be. I don't know if they're like a top 10 unit, but they're my favorite for the Super Bowl for a reason. It starts with number 10.
I don't want to be, not to jump in front of you here. I don't want to necessarily be anti-Geno because I do think that what Steven is saying about the comparison, at least if there was any narrative or conversation to be had about what Sam Howell could be within this offense versus Geno Smith, that was clearly put to bed today. But I will say, like, if you just look at Seattle's offense through 3 quarters, which is when Geno got hurt, and compared it to through 3 quarters the rest of the year, it was the second lowest success rate of the season for them, the highest sack rate allowed for them, the worst EPA per dropback versus pressure for them this year. And I think that into the half, the interception that he threw was like a really big encapsulation, A, of the problems that this offense has when Geno is not, making magic for them, and then B, just what Green Bay seeks to do. defensively. You had the drop pick when they went to like a rolled cover 2 where Geno, you clearly could tell that Geno just did not see the rotation happening at all, just flings the ball out there. It's a dropped interception. The very next play, I think it was a cover 0 pressure or a 5-man pressure where they're playing man, and Geno just heaves the ball out to the corner pylon. And it's funny, in watching those 2 throws, the first name I thought about was exactly who we talked about in the preview show, and it's Dak Prescott when he's chasing 2 scores. And it turns into, I got to make something happen, right? Especially when you're taking pressure. And I think that that's reflective of, for all the things that we get, all the credit we gave Ryan Grubb over the last couple weeks when this offense got hot, especially finding things in the run game that work for them. The protection plan tonight, I thought, was one of the worst that they've had this year, at least one of the worst that they've had in a little while. They clearly had no answer for the mugged looks. They didn't have any answer for the simulated pressures and creepers that Green Bay threw at them on passing downs. I thought the offensive line looked about as bad as it has this year, or at least in a little while, last few weeks or so. But to me, I just think that Seattle's offense just kind of showed you who they are. And it's not that this is the only thing that they are, because we've seen what it was over the last 3-4 weeks where they were moving the ball really well when Geno is healthy. But that's more of a Geno thing than it ever was a Ryan Grubb thing. And I think the same thing existed with the last regime as well. And I'm just looking for what this team can do to try to lift the floor around him a little bit, because for averaging 5 yards per carry on the ground, and I thought that he was able to connect with DK Metcalf, so much of it didn't matter because they just didn't have a good enough plan to get themselves out of bad situations where they were in second and obvious and third and obvious passing situations.
I want to soft launch a take. Like, I know that the offensive tackle positions are seen as the most valuable, and they're the ones that get paid the most. But for my money, I feel like I would start building an offensive line around the interior. And I think Seattle is like the perfect illustration of that. I know their young tackles have been in and out of the lineup and have been inconsistent, but the main problem when you watch them play is pressure up the middle. When you have a quarterback who can move around and can make plays out of structure, but it's not something he like majors in, and he's not one of the best in the league. I think you need to have that solid pocket where he can kind of work the pocket, step up, slide if he has to. But when he can't do that, the offense just isn't viable at all. And I think it's the same problem that Dallas gets into. You made the Dak Prescott comparison when they fall into these games and they get pressure up the middle. Dak Prescott can't do anything about it. And I think that's what separates these like tier 2 quarterbacks from the elite guys, from the guys like Josh Allen, who's going to be good no matter what the environment is around him, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, but like a Dak Prescott, a Geno Smith, these like tier 2 guys, if they don't have protection or the offense just is flawed in some way, like they have a fatal flaw with the run game, then it's going to be hard for them to elevate that kind of roster. So I think there's like very obvious spots that Seattle could address in the offseason to kind of make things easier on Geno Smith, like Diante's talking about. But it's going to have to start with the interior of that offensive line. That's been the problem for the last 3 years, and it hasn't been addressed yet.
You flip it around and you look at Green Bay's offensive line on the interior, and that was a big part of why Jordan Love is able to attack aggressively down the field. I mean, I think, maybe it'll change as PFF continues to update it, but looking at True Media before we got on the show today, they only had 1 registered pressure, and it definitely felt like that watching the game for Green Bay's offensive line. I mean, we talked a lot about Leonard Williams being a difference maker. We talked a lot about that pass rush kind of starting to figure out who's going to play what role and how to maximize what they wanted to get out of their front 7 in terms of just applying pressure to quarterbacks. And there was none of that on Sunday night. And I think that that's a big credit to what Green Bay has done in terms of drafting and developing guys and taking that best 5 approach and being able to move guys around. You can definitely see the value of that in these kinds of games. And then on the other side, like Steven was saying, I think it's very revelatory if you're John Schneider and the Seahawks brass to be looking at a young team like that you probably are aspiring to get your roster to, and looking and saying that, like, it's not just landing tackles. It's about building an entire infrastructure, using the offensive line as a way to say, hey, this is how we build a healthy offensive infrastructure, as we're not going to allow ourselves to have weaknesses on the interior or just across the board. That's going to be a big thing for them going forward.
All right, take a break. We come back. We're going to move to the AFC and the wild card picture. Big game there today that put some things in place. We'll talk about it here in a moment. We are back on the Ringer NFL show. New game today. Thank you to one of our producers, Dan Comer, for the name. We are calling it Contender, or Disruptor. We are looking at the AFC wildcard teams. The picture got a little clearer today with the Broncos beating the Colts here. But here are the definitions. So content is they're happy to be there. They're going to be one and done, but they're happy to be there in the playoffs. Contender, watch out. Sometimes the wild card teams can go on a run and get to the Super Bowl. Disruptor means, all right, maybe they can win a game if, feeling really frisky, if everything goes right, maybe two. So not real contenders, but they're also not going to be one and done. Those are the definitions. Here's what it looks like in the standings right now. So right now we've got the Baltimore Ravens with the first wild card spot. However, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think we sort of believe that that's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers and that the Baltimore Ravens are going to be first in the AFC North. Do we agree on that?
Yeah, it'll be 6 days from now. They'll be in the first place, and they play on Saturday.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about the Steelers. We're going to talk about the Chargers, and we're going to talk about the Broncos. But let's start with the Broncos, because Broncos have that game against the Colts today. That was three quarters in. You're thinking, watch out. The Colts could pull off the upset. They're right in this thing. Things fall apart for the Colts. Broncos have a couple of some of the highest leverage plays of the entire weekend. They get a couple of them in a row, and they outscore the Colts 21-0 in the fourth quarter there. Ruiz, we can start with you. Your thoughts on Denver today, or whether you view them as contender, or disruptor, now that they've pretty much, not 100%, but they are in a great spot here in the AFC wildcard picture.
They're content. They're just happy to be here. They're not. I don't think they're a disruptor. I think their track record against good quality teams speaks for itself. And I thought this game was honestly a game that kind of got outplayed for the first 3 quarters, and then they blew it open in the fourth quarter, thanks to just a handful of just boneheaded mistakes, starting with Jonathan Taylor dropping the football on a touchdown that would have made it a 2-score game and probably put the game out of reach because of how bad Denver's offense was in this game. A lot of their points were generated because of turnovers, whether it was Michael Pittman fumbling or the Jonathan Taylor fumble, or Anthony Richardson throwing picks, or A.D. Mitchell. I don't even know what to call that. The picked off lateral, the pick six.
I see Diante's face as a defensive coach. Like, Diante, you're like, if my OC did that to me in a tight game, I can only imagine the smoke that would be coming out of your ears.
Look, there's a reason why sometimes you need to coach from the box. Sometimes you can't be standing next to your peers in those situations out of fear for what you might do if something goes wrong.
But yeah, this was not like a very convincing performance for either side. It obviously wasn't one for Indianapolis, who has a 15% chance of making the playoffs, but that doesn't look like a scenario that's going to be realistic going forward. But the Broncos, they're just a year ahead. I don't know how else to put it. I thought this was a setback for Bo Nix. He had a couple of ugly throws, a couple of ugly interceptions. The first one, I don't know what he was looking at. It was very Will Levis coded. The second one was very Anthony Richardson coded. It was like the same exact interception that Anthony Richardson had thrown earlier in the game. But yeah, I mean, these were two bad teams, not bad teams, but mediocre teams squaring off, and it looked like it.
Yeah, the Colts outgained the Broncos 310 yards to 193 yards. Broncos had 121 net passing yards. But to your point, I mean, imagine losing your playoff hopes because Jonathan Taylor drops the ball right before the goal line. I mean, I don't want to be reductive with it, Diante, but I'm with Ruiz. At that point in the game, if they score there, I think they win the game. They were in control. It felt like, control. And that obviously would have been 7 points on the board. And then to go to that for the double pass that gets pick six, man, they really had an opportunity that they let slip away today. And that's to the benefit of the Broncos.
I don't think you should call that double pass if not for the drop would be touchdown from Jonathan Taylor. To me, that smacked of a team of a coaching staff that might have felt like, oh man, we might have just given away our opportunity to really pry open this door for us to make the playoffs. And now we're searching for answers, especially as our quarterback. And this is not the first time this has happened, has cooled off in the second half. I thought that, we kind of joked about it that Anthony Richardson would not know what side Patrick Surtain was on at least one of these throws, and it was going to end up in an interception.
I forgot
and we got exactly that. We got exactly that in the fourth quarter of this football game. But to Steven's point, it's the same thing you were saying, Sheil. I mean, you get the long punt return, you get a pick six on a double pass, like you get the one-on-one ball to Cortland Sutton that basically put the game away in the fourth quarter. Like they have, and the same thing happened in the Browns game on Monday night earlier this week or last week. So often with this team, they're playing bad teams or playing flawed teams, and they end up winning the variance game because Sean Payton has his team, and Vance Joseph has his team just a little bit more prepared than their opponent. And that's credit to them for being able to get ahead of schedule.
Yes.
Like Steven said, I thought that this might be a competitive team in 2026 or 2025. I didn't expect them to be here on the first year of Bo Nix's rookie deal. So that's definitely a credit to what they've been able to get out of this team from a coaching perspective. But no, they're content. They're going to run into a Baltimore, or you're going to run into a Baltimore. You're going to run into a Buffalo in the first round. And they're just going to get wiped off the face of the earth, I think, against a competent quarterback and a team that is not as liable to beat themselves as some of the teams they've been seeing down the stretch this year.
I'm content too, with a little caveat. I mean, like right now, they would go to, and I know we all said we agree this is going to change, but in case it doesn't, they would go to Pittsburgh right now in the first round if the season ended today. I think they could win that game. I don't think that is a big spread in that game. The Broncos right now, their defense is first in EPA per drive in the entire NFL. So to your point, Vance, I know it's a little like up and down, and that doesn't take into account opponents. But if you're facing the Steelers, like I kind of like their chances to be a little frisky against the Steelers in that spot. Now, if they were to move up to the 5 spot, which again is unlikely, but going to Houston, I mean, I don't view Houston or Pittsburgh, I think are gettable in the first round in a one-off game. You don't think so?
You would bet on.
I wouldn't bet. No. I didn't say I would bet on. I just said there. Like I don't know.
I guess you could say there's a credible argument to be made in both.
What would the spread be? It would be like what, 3.5?
I'll say 4.5. Probably 4.5.
The Steelers are going to beat themselves, and the Broncos are opponents beating themselves merchants, or at least they have been for the past couple of weeks. So I don't know. And I mean, as bad as Houston has looked, especially on offense, D'Amico Ryans against that offense would be a mismatch. Yeah. I don't know. I think the team that they could beat, and it's impossible to set up this matchup, is the Chargers. That's the only team I can see them beating in this playoff field right now.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, they're credible. They're credible, right? Like I don't want to totally discount what this run has been for them in the second half of the season. Basically, since that Ravens loss for them, they've been playing pretty good football. The issue is just that we have not had it stamped with them beating a quality football team. Maybe I feel differently if the field goal doesn't get blocked against Kansas City, because you would just have a different data point, right? And I don't want to be that arbitrary and unfair to Denver, because they played excellently in that game as well. It's just a matter of so much of this is Bo Nix being able to operate in like the most comfortable scenarios possible for a rookie quarterback, because things are happening on schedule. When it's not on schedule, he's able to just heave the ball up to Cortland Sutton, or they'll have a screen that goes for a big yardage. And they've been winning the variance game on defense. And to me, at this point now, there's maybe enough data points to say that this is just working for Vance Joseph this season. And maybe there's not going to be regression coming because of just how effective they've been with blitzing and playing man and applying pressure in spite of not having a number one pass rusher in this unit. So to me, I don't want to totally discredit them. It's just a matter of, you see CJ Stroud and D'Amico Ryans, there's no way I think that you're going to beat that team. You see Mike Tomlin and the Steelers defense, I don't think there's any way that they can beat that team. And we've already seen what it looked like against Baltimore, and there's absolutely no way that they're going to do anything with Josh Allen if they have to see them in a 2-7 matchup. So I'm content with them just being content in this exercise.
If you guys had eyes on this game or how closely, because I did not. The Chargers take on the Bucs. and get smoked 40-17, give up 506 yards of offense? Jesse Minter, what happened here? Diante, I think you were messaging us a little bit about this game. What happened to the Chargers? How do we feel about the Chargers after this game? Content, contender, or disruptor?
I think the Chargers are content because we've been looking at the ceiling for this defense maybe over the last month or so, and I think that we're really just at least I have come to the realization that there's not enough juice in the back seven, I think, to handle a truly high octane offense. And that's all that this was. This was Baker Mayfield. Even when he's pressured, he did make a couple mistakes today, but for the most part, he was able to pick on the mismatches that he wanted, especially in the middle of the field. And when you're dealing with the Jesse Minter defense that we've seen that does not want to give up explosive plays, that wants to crowd the middle of the field and force you to either win outside the numbers or have to deal with uncomfortable pockets, holding the ball, waiting for windows to come open, the Bucs really didn't have any issues with that, especially in the second half. I mean, they totally burned this defense up in the third or fourth quarters just by being efficient in the passing game. I'm not there with the Chargers defensively anymore, and we know what the issues have been with this offense throughout the season.
Yeah, and it looked like Justin Herbert retweaked his ankle injury. He got rolled up on it in a sack, and like Taylor Heineke came in. So, yeah, I'm with Diante here. And I think the main problem was they couldn't cover Mike Evans. Like every time I looked up at this game, Mike Evans was catching the ball over the middle and just like bouncing off of Chargers defenders. And I think Diante has it spot on. They don't have the dudes in the secondary. When you don't have the dudes, and then they're not getting pressure on Baker Mayfield because of all the things Liam Cohen's doing to set that up. And then Baker Mayfield, I know, he overcame some mistakes, but once he started rolling, like they couldn't stop them at all. Yeah. And this just looked like the team that we expected to see before the season. I mean, I obviously think this is like the worst they've looked all year, and that doesn't really that's not really a good illustration of who they are as a team. But if Justin Herbert is going to be hobbling, and he started missing throws after the ankle, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, they hadn't lost a game by more than 7 points since week 3 to the Steelers, and they lose 40-17 to the Tampa Bay Bucs. I'll still give the same caveat. If they're going to Houston or if they're going to Pittsburgh in the first round with Jim Harbaugh, and if Justin Herbert is healthy, I'll at least think it's a little bit interesting. You don't think so,
man?
Yeah,
I just don't see it.
You guys think more of those teams than I do.
On this passing game, I don't even know if it's that as much as just the ceiling on the passing game for Los Angeles is so low. It takes so much work and investment for them to get any positive results out of it. And as I said, if the defense starts taking any step back, then it really just opens up how flawed this roster is. And they're very similar to Denver in that respect, right? Like, I think that way ahead of schedule for this team in terms of expectations. I did not think the first half of the year was going to look like this for them. And I think that they've shown that they're at least competent enough to be able to hang with some of the better teams in the NFL. I just think that if you have an offense that's explosive enough to be able to push the ball and force them to have to keep pace, you just saw on Sunday that this offense is just not equipped to do that at all. Even if Justin Herbert is healthy and now that his ankle is really bothering him, I don't trust him to be able to score enough to be able to beat a true playoff team.
And they did. We talked about the passing defense and the struggles they had. They gave up 223 yards on the ground too.
On the ground, yeah.
Lucky Irvin goes for 117. Rashad White had 64. So this was an all-around concerning performance for the defense. And then obviously with Justin Herbert limping off the field, it's a concern for the whole franchise.
It's a Brandon Staley tribute night. That's all. Sorry, that was me. That was uncalled for. Thanks to everyone for watching on FanDuel TV. For more, check us out on Spotify. Check us out on YouTube at Ringer NFL or wherever you get your podcasts.